Hello, and welcome to this new episode of Harmoniously podcast. Here's Melissa.
And this is Rachel. Hi, everyone.
So, welcome. And in this episode, we're going to talk about ketamine again. We love ketamine at Harmoniously. And, and we're going to talk about how ketamine is a great ally for therapy and coaching.
Yeah.
And before doing that, we're going to start, as always, with a arrival practice. So just take a comfortable position, and if you can, close your eyes and just take one deep, big breath. Inhale, exhale. Just allow yourself to connect with your breath. Allow yourself to be arriving to this present moment. Allow yourself to be arriving to this discussion, to this session. Allow yourself to be present. Allow yourself to be here. There is no way to go, nowhere to go. Just connect with your breath. And then slowly open your eyes. And by the way, we also have another channel. It's Mindfulness by Harmoniously, where we share meditation. So if you like to have more meditation, just check that out. All right. So in this episode, we're going to discuss therapy and coaching and how therapy and coaching can benefit to with the ketamine. So as see ketamine as an ally, as a tool that really supports treatments.
Yes. And I thought a lot about this topic, right? Because you hear it all the time. I mean, I even have clients reflect back to me like, oh, therapy and ketamine, like CAP work, or, this kind of model that we have. And there's a reason why. And I think some people, I don't think it's what we think it is. So there is some really good literature and data that supports the use of therapy and coaching with this type of treatment,
Mhm.
just as much as there is for therapy and coaching on their own or with other
Mhm.
treatments or other classic antidepressants. But I'd like to focus just for a minute on let's start at the beginning. Like, why does anyone go to coaching or therapy or create these kinds of alliances in life in the first place, right? Like, why would someone want to go to therapy or want to go to a coaching, program? I'm of the mindset, like just personally, that like everyone should be born with a therapist or a life coach of some kind to like help you navigate the unknown
Mhm.
terrain, right? We're not born knowing like how to program our brains in a perfect way to like
Mhm.
live our most authentic life. So like
Yeah.
just to break it down from like a neuroscientific standpoint, right? So in early life, we are, our brains are just forming connections. They are learning through our bonds with our attachment, right? So like our parental figures or our intimate partnerships early on. So brothers, sisters, family members in the home, we're learning how we attach, and that is influenced by so many things. But that can also predispose us to more anxiety, more depression, other symptoms if that attachment is not terribly secure. There's also things like just the programming that we receive in different cultures, different societies, different language we receive in our
Mhm.
home, education, right? Just all of this creates templates. Like our brain works on a system that goes, okay, that makes sense. This connects, this connects. And that's the new structure, right? This is a new hardwired system that we're developing. Oftentimes, though, I don't know anyone that grew up in like a perfect situation to create perfect programming for their brains. So we often arrive in our early adulthood or even later adulthood with symptoms of anxiety or depression or fear or belief systems that are holding us back from living our most genuine, most authentic lives, from experiencing joy, from experiencing happiness the way we'd like to, or connection the way we'd like to. So, to bring it back to therapy and coaching, like at least for me personally, and many of the clients I serve, we go to therapy, we go to coaching to learn an internal dialogue, an internal process of like naming the feelings, naming the sensations, processing or digesting information we receive from our environment, and also challenging, I think, some of those like templates that exist, right? Like the belief systems that are already there, like the what if it all falls apart system, right? Like, what if this all breaks down? What if nothing works out? What if I don't get what I need? Like, it's learning to confront these systems and logically work through them. Like, therapy in a nutshell is teaching us our own internal process to have to come back to navigate all of life, right? So, I think that's kind of a good starting point. But what are your thoughts, Melissa, especially from the coaching lens? Like, why do
Yeah.
people come find a coach?
hmm Well, first of all, I love that you starting introducing why people go to therapy or coaching and what is the use in general of it. And it's absolutely true that we are born like so while I was studying intercultural studies, so what is a culture?
Mhm.
uh, there was always this metaphor or this analogy used with using technology. So like we are born and we have an operating system. So it's
Mhm.
everything. It's or like a word file, whatever. It's blank Canva, right?
Yeah.
That has inherent and natural possibilities to learn, right? Like we have they call it language acquisition device, for example, for languages in our brain. So we have this ability to learn
Yeah.
the language. So our brain, just through input of the
Yeah.
environment, we can just create statistics and
Yeah.
learn any language in the world. Doesn't matter where you're born. No matter where your DNA, if you're born, whatever you're born, the inputs you get is what you absorb, acquire.
Wow.
And the same it goes with the culture, and to say the culture is like learn acquired by osmosis even before you can start to talk.
Mhm.
And so we have all this conditioning that
Yes.
are there, and it's just not only like learned at school, and definitely school or
Mhm.
parents when they like openly learn, openly teach, like explain how to do things.
Yeah.
um I, Apart from that, even before that, by
Mhm.
osmosis
Mhm.
we get that. So we have these conditionings that is just like taken in, and
Mhm.
all this conditioning that we have is what take us away from the source of who we are deep inside. And
Mhm.
then definitely school and all society.
Yeah.
And I don't we're not criticizing that. It's just
Yeah.
human being has
Mhm.
developed life on earth in the environment we're in, and created like school created education for the best, with the
Mhm.
best intentions. But these best intentions um, are work against the individual nature of each person. And and so this individual nature that can blossom, I think we said that before, it's like we have this seed and we can
Mhm.
blossom into the beautiful plant or flower that we are. And this is never taught anywhere. And
Yeah.
that's what a therapist or a coach can support you to become your true self, and gives you the tools. In coaching, even more, we say that therapy focus a lot more on the past.
Mhm.
So to overcome
Yeah.
traumas, to
Yeah.
overcome certain mental states. And I think we said that before, it's like a continuum, like
Mhm.
sadness, a certain point can become anxiety or depression, right?
Yeah.
But so in this continuum, when after when it becomes more of the dominion, let's say, of therapy, that's where you want to
Yeah.
address with therapy. When you are when you are able to manage that, and you feel to focus more on your present and your future, that's where you can work with a coach.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And I love that the way you talked about, early childhood and school experiences. and these kinds of constructs that we're programmed with, that we're exposed to, it's almost as if like the side effect of that, like it's not a judgment, it's like a fact, right? Like that's how we
Mhm.
grow up. Like this is how beings grow up on earth. Like we're all navigating like global crisis and all kinds of, I mean, imagine like growing up through the depression. We've had kids that have graduated high school during COVID, like all of these major like world changes. But the side effect of some of these types of conditioning or programming is that they often lead us further from our true source, our
Mhm.
internal sources of joy, our internal locus of control. So the process of therapy and or coaching can navigate and help us learn the architecture of A, what is here, and B, where we want to go, right? Like in a nutshell,
Mhm.
that's really what we're doing, is navigating, learning this language, this internal dialogue that we all have going on, that most of us are not taught how to access, not taught how to own, not taught how to like express, right? And that
Mhm.
gives us a different momentum moving forward. So, on its own, like coaching and therapy, incredible, valuable assets at learning like our internal cartography, right? Like learning this internal landscape. A, that's important to review the past because that's often where a lot of the present comes
Mhm.
from. But as much so, it's important to be able to identify what's going on in the present and where we'd like to go, right? So, coaching as well. And then I think when we add in, I mean, I'm sure you've seen them too. I have lots of clients that have been in like traditional types of coaching or therapeutic relationships for, let's say, a couple of years. And now they're not getting anywhere, or they've got some blockages that are like, I can't move past this thing, or
Mhm.
I can't get past this relationship in my past, or I can't get unmad at my mom, or whatever it is. We reach something in that relationship where it's almost as if we don't have access to it. And all the language and all the tools and all the skills, we still can't get through this thing. I think that's a really common experience in therapeutic relationships and coaching relationships, these blockages, these kind of internal places of like resistance. These can happen for a million reasons, right? So sometimes it is
Mhm.
that there's something significantly traumatic about that that has really walled itself off to protect self, right? This
Mhm.
could be from early childhood trauma that's even pre-verbal, so we don't even have actual language to access it, right? So when this is occurring pre-2 or pre-verbal time,
Yes.
there isn't language to access that. It's a feeling. So it's more like we've talked about before, like it's the way our brain codes in picture. And our brain will try to protect us from these things because like that's scary, it's bad, don't go there, right? So it's like, we're just
Mhm.
gonna put that in a separate segment of self. Or there's something more there. I think that's where we see the usefulness of tools like ketamine treatment, right, come in. Because now we have this other kind of tool in our toolbox that we add that allows our brain to dissolve barriers, that allows our brain to access deeper origins, puts our brain in a plastic state, allows us to be more amenable to understanding the architecture, the landscape we're working with, especially in therapy.
Mhm.
So, like, I've had clients be working through things they've been working on in therapy for 20 years and finally get that breakthrough or that like movement, moving the needle a little bit with ketamine treatment when they're in a therapeutic process, right?
Mhm.
So, what we're doing is we're taking ketamine treatment, right? So, this might be at home, it could be IV infusion, it could be whatever, however you're utilizing this. For us specifically, we have an at home model. We're using sessions typically weekly at home and initially, and then we might be branching out to a kind of more distant cadence, maybe once every couple of weeks, maybe once a month dosing. And then we're taking what's happening following, and we're able to move into our therapeutic sessions or coaching sessions with a different plasticity. We're able to see some of those templates. And we're able to
Mhm.
start installing new ones, right? Because now our brain has neurochemically BDNF protein, it's got all kinds of neurochemistry to allow neurons to reach out and create new neural highways. So when this happens, it becomes much easier to install a new template. And as we've learned before, neurons that fire together wire together, right? It's a classic saying in therapy. It means something though, because often with our conditioning early on in our programming, it is reinforced multiple times before it seals that deal, right? So neurons that fire together wire together. So we've got this conditioning and it's repeated over time. This isn't one time for most of us. Trauma it can be a one-time exposure. But in oftentimes, this is little things that occur time and time again. So we learn statistics, right? We learn
Mm-hmm.
what the outcomes are most likely to be. When we go through a therapeutic process or we have ketamine on board now too, we're able to kind of overcome those templates more readily. We're able to go, and I always refer to this system because it's something I experience. It's like the what if system. What if this all falls apart? What if this doesn't work out? What if this
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make it? What if? Now we're able to kind of branch further down that and say, what if it all works out? What if I get
Mm-hmm.
everything I need? Because statistically, that's just as likely, but it's not what our
Mm-hmm.
brain thinks,
Mm-hmm.
right? Our brain's like,
Yeah.
what if this all is detrimental? What if this
Mm-hmm.
breaks down and falls apart and this is it? But then we learn through maybe coaching and therapeutic connections the ability to start installing the new template that says, what if this all works out great? What if I get everything I need? What if this is an amazing new chapter? What if this is full of joy? What if this is full of connection? What if this is because that's just as statistically likely to occur? And
Mm-hmm.
that is where we really start to change the way our brain thinks, right? The thoughts we
Mm-hmm.
think, we're able to start, I think, dispelling some of those cognitive distortions, right? We all are kind of born, especially in this kind of Western society, with like these deeply rooted cognitive distortions. We have these kind of thoughts and beliefs that just aren't true. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're able to kind of start working with another guidance system to start installing templates that might be more true for us and just
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what those are. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, like with ketamine or other psychedelic, it's really, as you said, like it, they are able to open you up to the new possibility really exists, right?
Yes.
One thing is knowing it or hearing it, and so sort of accepting it intellectually,
Hmm.
and another a different thing is really feeling it, and that's what psychedelic helps us to really experience that something different exists. And we talk other times about also something different, as you said, like it in a different mindset, and
Hmm.
also from a different mindset up to oneness, to other dimensions of reality.
Hmm.
So they're able to make us experience that, and at that point we are more open up to also do any kind of work with coaching or therapy.
Yeah.
I'm impressed that you were giving that example of that patient, that woman that was in
Mhm.
therapy for 20 years.
Mhm.
She really was really determined,
Yeah.
because many people, I think, will give up
Give
early
up.
on, much earlier than 20 years. 20
Yeah.
years is really long.
Yeah.
So good for her that
Yeah.
she
Exactly.
didn't give up. But
Yeah.
I can see other people would not be so determined, and so actually having the support of psychedelic to be able to see something different exist, to be able to understand that what they're feeling, a feeling of, I would say, uncomfort,
Yeah.
whatever that is. We can label that in different ways, from PTSD, anxiety, but
Sure.
overall is being uncomfort of being in your life,
Yeah.
be
Totally.
unsatisfied, not knowing why. And psychedelic help us to see, and also, as you said, helps us to remember certain things that happens also in our past, and
Yeah.
probably they're covered, as you said, from certain blogs, or maybe it's too hurtful to go back to revive review those things. But maybe it's also like, as you said, it was pre-word, so it was just so
Hmm.
confusing for the little baby. And
Hmm.
I know I heard many people with mm, psychedelic having experience of even before birth,
Yes.
some trauma before birth, like before. In me personally, also, I felt some trauma before being birthed, right?
Yeah.
Just before when the labor started.
Yes.
Or I heard also other people just before the labor started,
Yeah.
and then the labor, and that's something that it just stays in an emotional trauma within you,
Mhm.
and that's really, I think, any amount of therapy. Maybe there is some um, hypnosis,
Yep.
something like that, but definitely psychedelic can really help in seeing those
Yes.
things, and be
Yeah.
able to take you somehow out of yourself and see as a scene and feel it and understand it. And so at that point, you can work that with a therapist or a
Mhm.
coach
Yeah.
and be able to overcome that otherwise it would be really hard or almost
Yes.
impossible.
Well, and I think that's specifically why we see, ketamine and other psychedelics working so synergistically. And when we say synergistically, we mean 1 and 1 equals 3, not 2. So you get
Mm-hmm.
more from both. Because now we're having this experiential benefit of the psychedelic, right? So there's this moment of moments being inside of the experience itself, which is usually very brief. But I think that's just it, is that it actually challenges the most uncomfortable place we have, which is reality. It challenges our entire architecture of reality. That ability to confront an altered state of reality, right? Not our regular reality, not the constructs of like my walls and my computer desk and my chair and my car. This challenges the entire known universe of your reality. And in
Mm-hmm.
order to do that, it's typically, I mean, it could be very uncomfortable. It could be very disruptive in some states,
Mm-hmm.
right? But to do so in a way that's controlled and therapeutic and come out of it, it's almost as if your brain goes, wait a minute, if there's more to reality, then there might be more to this grief, this fear, this boundary issue, this attachment issue, this anxiety, this depression, whatever it might be. It allows your brain, it almost cracks the door open wide for your brain to start saying, wait a minute, if reality is under question, there we can question all of it, right? It
Mm-hmm.
creates this kind of like fulcrum point to kind of allow our brain to start investing differently in what's there. And I love that you brought up we talk about it in a different form. So, like with EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and
Mm-hmm.
reprocessing, there is another, we've actually very much that community looks at pre birth trauma or even conception trauma, because
Mm-hmm.
this is basically once we've become a collection of cells, there is some idea there that, like, if there is trauma experienced, it is stored in our emotional body somewhere, right? I
Mm-hmm.
know we've determined scientifically that we are storing some of this cellularly, right? Which is why somatic work can be so valuable. We need to move trauma out of body. And we're not taught this. We're not taught how to like move our fascia or like release tension in our hips or like where that neck strain might be coming from emotionally. So this gives us more language, more tools to be able to work through whatever it is that's coming up in our life. And I think that it's just that therapists and coaches tend to be the most articulate in these languages, right? They are here to help us determine what our own internal language is and how
Mm-hmm.
to navigate that as a human on this journey in life. I think that with ketamine on board, especially because of its neuroplastic, offerings, we find that the people that were really stumbling around areas of blockages or areas of maladaption, they are far more amenable to making adaptation, right? So we're seeing these brains go, wait a minute, like that was crunchy and difficult and I couldn't get past it or through it. Now they're like, wait a minute, that's not it at all. That's because that wasn't the thing. It's this thing over here. And they're just moving through these things more effortlessly. It really
Mm-hmm.
decreases the friction moving through the trauma that we need to work through, the emotional stored trauma, the cognitive trauma, the stress, right? We could just call it a big ball of stress that our bodies are navigating through. It becomes more efficient to do so. So, from like the therapist and coaching lens, working with these clients, it's like we've been working with them for years, and all of a sudden they're making different movement. They're
Mm-hmm.
making different strides. They're understanding things in a different way. And I think that brings us to a great point to talk about integration, because I think there's some misunderstanding still surrounding what integration might look like. like, and why
Mm-hmm.
it's so important. And I know we've talked about integration in the past, but I mean this
Mm-hmm.
specifically in this capacity because I actually had something interesting challenge this for me recently
Mm-hmm.
with a client. And that's, I think, fairly specific to the ketamine experience. The ketamine experience isn't always like the most profound, like, experience, right? It isn't always this like meaningful, profound imagery that comes to mind where we meet source or we move through our childhood. Sometimes it's just a bunch of chaos and it's like a bunch of landscapes and colors, and maybe it's a sense of being somewhere else, but it isn't
Mm-hmm.
always meaningful. And I mean that in the way that like we can make sense of, right? That we have language to make sense. And I think that calls into question the idea of integration work, right? Because I think a lot of us think about it like you have an experience, you have imagery or thoughts come up or feelings come up, and then you move to going to like therapy or coaching to do integration work, to like figure it out. And I don't think that's it at all. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, right, what comes up is like a bunch of whatever, like our brain's using weird metaphors to like reprogram whatever it needs to do in its own language.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes this is influenced by, like we already talked about, the content we've been viewing, right? Like whatever's going on in our subconscious, unconscious patterns. So sometimes the experience isn't terribly valuable to take and try to break down and suss out and kind of garden through. It's really just a bunch of like hodgepodged images. That does not mean that there's not integration work to do. It just means that it isn't this direct relationship of taking this experience, breaking it down in therapy, and saying, this is what happened and this is the meaning. Do you agree with that? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
does that feel for you? Because you do a ton of integration work.
So I totally agree with that. So it was making me smile because um so what happened before I was already thinking what happened before we start using um psychedelic or we start approaching therapy or coaching. Lots of let's say our issue, quote unquote issues, is that we are a lot in our mind, in our ego, in trying to figure out everything, interpret everything. And then we're open up with this kind of beautiful experience and therapy. And as you said, okay, we go through this beautiful experience and then we come out and want to figure out everything again. So again, our mind come back in, and that was the problem to begin with. And we
Exactly.
all done that. And also another things, and I think we can all be guilty of that, is that okay, if we cannot find an explanation, we're gonna Google that. And try to figure out and see if Google has some definition of some interpretation of what we saw in psychedelic experience.
Right. Google knows.
Yeah,
Right.
to see like, oh, so that I don't know, that image means that, or the and
Yeah.
it's I don't think that how it works. And as you said, and it's not in integration is not at all okay figuring out and interpret and giving a meaning of everything we saw
Yeah.
during the experience.
Yeah.
Maybe there's no meaning. What if there is no meaning? What if there was, yeah, there's no meaning. It was there to experience, to
Exactly.
feel, to get
Yes.
out of the thinking mind and
Mhm.
to get in other psychological function.
Yeah.
So I'm a coach in psychosynthesis.
Mhm.
Psychosynthesis is a framework that is based on Jungian psychology and that blends Eastern and Western philosophy. And its aim is to integrate all the parts of ourselves.
Mhm.
So according with psychosynthesis, there's this explanation of how we have multiple psychological functions. There are six. And only one of it is thinking mind, the logic mind, the ego.
Yeah.
And then we have urges and desires together, emotions, imagination, intuition, and body sensations. I
Mhm.
think, yeah. And we often, mostly, are into the thinking mind, which is the most developed, especially in the West. And definitely, we are in our emotions, and we do feel the urges. But we pretty much dismiss everything, and we just give more importance to the thinking mind and to interpret. to give meaning to that and that. And and again, that's what is the issue in the first place.
Yeah.
um I remember, I don't know if you ever heard of like Native Americans when European came to this continent or American continent, and their comment were, oh, they have a disease, they're too much in our mind, that's their problem. And we still are. So with with
Yeah.
it was continuing being, yes. And the thinking mind is an absolutely great tool,
Yes.
so there's nothing to like
Yeah.
deny about that.
Yeah.
But yes, remember that this psychedelic experience help us also to go in other parts of our psychological functions, to all of to other abilities that we have.
Yeah.
And with integration and with coaching and therapy, integrating that experience, the integration is not interpretation, is not
Mm-hmm.
finding what the meaning, but
Yeah.
just take that experience to open up to whatever is that in front of us in life, to create
Yes.
something that is truly in alignment with us.
Yeah.
And while you were talking about integration, I was almost, because like in Harmoniously, we say that we want to integrate. We have an
Mm-hmm.
integrated approach to wellness, and we
Yes.
integrate, so put together, um, okay, ketamine, we put together mind, body, and soul, see people as a whole of mind, body, and soul, and not as a patient, not as a symptom, but like
Yeah.
a whole. So we're thinking, what if also we approach this idea of integration again differently? Integration is a beautiful word, but like, so integration is not making meaning of the experience, but
Yes.
really use the experience with the coaching, with the therapy, as a
Mm-hmm.
one process.
Mm-hmm. I That gave me the most beautiful like analogy in my brain, and this is what comes to me from that. It's almost as if, especially, I love your lens of like psychosynthesis coaching, like looking at the different bodies, right, that we inhabit, right? Our thinking mind, our desires, our emotions, our felt senses, right? So all these components, and I think you said there were six.
Mm-hmm.
It really, like, our thinking mind is so dominant, right? And so like wants to derive meaning and wants to break things down. And that's a lovely sense. And it's, by the way, highly useful, right? Like when you're driving a car, you should be using your thinking mind, right? It's a very valuable tool. Keep it safe. Like, please don't stop using it. But it is this concept of weighted, right? So like if they were weighted, wouldn't the goal be to have a better sense of alignment, right? Like we want to have all of our bodies and senses aligned. And that to
Mm-hmm.
me is what harmoniously means. We want to bring all of our senses into alignment. We want to bring all of ourselves into integrated place, which is the state of harmony, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing. And I always think about this from the lens of like some of my therapeutic work I've done. Integration has for me never meant taking a psychedelic and then integrating that knowledge into your being. It has meant taking every previous experience, felt sense, emotion, physical experience, emotional experience, desire, thought, all the things, and integrating them into this entire being. So, like, everything that's come before, everything that is here presently, and everywhere we are going, integrated into this one being. That's me. That's this energy of me. It's the energy of you. It's
Mm-hmm.
the purpose, the all, basically the entire picture, right? For me, like, that's the
Mm-hmm.
point. So like integration for me never means like translate something or interpret something. It means taking the parts and making a
Mm-hmm.
whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that like That's what inspired me from your thought. It was also the way that like we've tied this to harmonious, right? Like that is the
Mm-hmm.
point that we're saying your logic mind is lovely and it's so wonderful. Use your other ones too, right? Like put them all in
Yeah.
balance. You bring them all to the table. Like they all have something valuable to offer. And we don't always have the tools to access those other senses, those other parts of self, those other languages that we have.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always have the way to communicate with them. And I think that's what a lot of coaching and therapy provides, is the ability to connect to them and communicate with them so that we
Mm-hmm.
can become more integrated, right? Like that's the whole
Yeah.
point, is all of these senses into a better state of harmony so that our forward trajectory is more of the way this energy is meant to be, right? Like,
Mhm.
and that's really a better way of, or a dumber way of saying, like, I just want to be a more authentic me. I want to be a more
Mhm.
genuine me. I want to bring more of my light to this world without all the other junk, right? All the other constructs, all the other like programming templates. I want to get back to more of the root of me, like the origins of this one. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yeah. Like I'm smiling because I was thinking what we say about integrated, being
Yeah.
integrated. I was thinking, okay, so again, nowadays, and I always love to use technology and analogies because they really
Yeah.
work well. And once again, in intercultural studies, there's also this book by of Stede, who's is from Holland. He's a
Mhm.
psychology from Holland. Okay, and that it's called Software of the Mind. Okay, so
Mhm.
there's a lot of analogy with technology and the
Mhm.
mind, right? So I said before, like how it's more like, so we have this software or also operating system,
Mhm.
and whoever is the techie out there, so don't if you want
Yeah.
to comment if my analogies are correct or not, but just
Feel free to
anyway,
correct us.
correct us, yes. So it's an operating system, right? So we have
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
amazing computer, like the best
Mhm.
computer out there,
Yeah.
right? And in this computer, the thinking mind is just one part, right? We have it's a whole like
Yeah.
amazing gadget or computer that we have,
Yeah.
the most powerful on earth, if you want. And then we have all these parts of us,
Yes.
right? There are not only the five senses and, as I said, the psychological functions and more that right
Mhm.
now are not integrated.
Yeah.
And that's also, if you want, that's why in technology, now more and more we see how everything is integrated and how you have a software that integrates all the other things so that when they are integrated, so what you do, you connect all these parts, they're all connected. So from one from one side you can connect to everything, and everything it works better and faster. So like
Yes.
making everything one, making it work more efficiently, making
Mhm.
it work as a whole that
Yes.
goes to a goal, an aim, a purpose, which
Yes.
in the case of a human is our life mission,
Yeah.
purpose aligned with our soul.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking about the integrated
Yes.
part.
And I think that really taps into like the bigger reason why we see consciousness expanding type medicines such as ketamine, other
Hmm.
psychedelics coming into the foreground now, especially in this therapeutic capacity. Yes, they absolutely, on their own as a medicinal form, have the ability to cause rapid antidepressant effects. Okay, so that's one bonus, right? They also can decrease anxiety symptoms. They can decrease our PTSD triggering symptoms. On top of that, the reason we're getting long term benefits, right? Because, like with classic medications like antidepressants, we take the medicine, we feel a little better, maybe it stops working, or we have to increase, or at some point we stop taking the med and it stops working. With ketamine and or consciousness expanding medicines, such as psychedelics, a similar philosophy could be true, that we take the medicine, we have the benefit, we stop the medicine, and our brain could go back to its old templates, right? Why would our brain want to use these new structures? They're not well vetted. They're not historically like the long term systems we've been using. And our
Hmm.
brain works on a heuristic structure. So it wants to use shortcuts. The
Hmm.
problem with that little computer system is that it wants to use shortcuts to be more efficient. The problem is it doesn't have a navigation system to tell if it's an efficient system or a non-efficient system. So it will go back to these old defaults when confronted with a new stressor, unless we have lots and lots of practice with these new templates,
Hmm.
i.e., in a therapeutic relationship, in a coaching relationship, in bringing more of these senses into alignment with lots of practice and repetition. Because we already know from a neuroscience standpoint, Neurons that fire together wire together. So we need lots of new reinforcement to encourage these new pathways to become permanent structures of our brain, so they are resources to us forevermore. This is how we
Mm-hmm.
can take a smaller treatment, a dose series, right? And somewhere between, I don't know, I'm just speculating, but like an 8 to like 30 dose series, and make them not just a time stamp, but something that we get exponential benefit from, right? That we see benefit from for years and years, because we're getting the reinforcement through therapy, through coaching,
Mm-hmm.
through this practice of challenging these neural networks and reinforcing some of the new kind of templates that we're installing, right? We have to teach
Mm-hmm.
it. In order to
Mm-hmm.
teach something, typically we have to do it repeatedly. It often isn't a singular experience that is going to solidify this in our brain as something that is permanently there for access. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
practice. It's like riding a bike, right? You have to practice a few
Yes.
times. Or, training for the Olympics, right? Like, you don't start off as an Olympic athlete. You start off as someone who's trying to jog, right? Or whatever. Like, there are people that are very athletic, and there are people that are more inclined to this type of work. But everybody has barriers. So utilizing therapy and coaching is one of the ways that we move through our own barriers, because everyone
Mm-hmm.
has them. I think that that's one of the best ways I see that this working. I think it allows us to also create a very safe place to confront some of the things that we need to, right? Or that do come up for most of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's the alliance we see with therapy and coaching, is that we've already dedicated a very safe space, rather than talking to
Mm-hmm.
your coworker at the water cooler, right? Which is valuable, or your best friend who may come with their own set of templates and programming,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When we're in a very safe alliance, like with
Mm-hmm.
coaching or therapy, we've created an entirely different space for this to occur. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the important places, is that we've created a safe place for
Mm-hmm.
this work to be done, right?
That's absolutely so important, as you said, like this safe space and supportive space. Because
Yes.
like a therapist or a coach, they have the tools and they are trained to be able to create that space for you,
Yeah.
so that can really be of a support for your growth.
Yeah.
Very different from friends or
Mhm.
family.
Yeah.
And
Valuable, just different.
yes, absolutely. And we normally know, I mean, friends and family can bring also their challenges, but
Yeah.
also the friends that are in a journey with us and they're already more open minded and they're already maybe doing also
Yeah.
some psychedelic as well. So you feel like those friends are your support system, but they're still
Yeah.
not coaches or therapists. They still don't
Yes.
have those tools, right?
Yeah.
This in they still are not able, unless
Mhm.
there are coaches and therapists themselves, but we'll have
Yeah.
that chance. But it's still not, don't have those tools to
Yeah.
really create a space, to create a program for you, support you. So
Yes.
that's really valuable.
Yeah.
And I wanted also to share my experience um and share that I've seen so many people how when they approach psychedelic, they are
Mm.
so much more open to do all the coaching work. As a coach, I know that side more.
Yes.
They are so open to try the tools, the
Mhm.
coaching tools that may look, for someone who hasn't done psychedelic, they may look, I don't know, childish, or they may look like they may not see the value, for
Mhm.
example, of, as we start the podcast, like with closing your eyes and do tune in practice.
Yeah.
They may don't see the value of close your eyes and feel your body sensations,
Mm.
right? But
Yeah.
those are all tools that are so important to
Yeah.
bring that integration of, as we said before, or the functions of yourself, of all the
Yeah.
whole self, into becoming one with all the parts of you, not just the thinking mind. And
Yeah.
psychedelic experience really open you up to understand that importance, and that enhance so much the work with that you can do with a coach and the therapist, and all the tools that a therapist and a coach can bring to the table. There are just put on steroids thanks to
Mhm.
thanks
Yeah.
to psychedelic, because
Yep.
everything will just be much more beneficial. And then, as you said, and psychedelic work, you can have an amazing experience. But
Mhm.
then um, if those new insights are not supported by practice, then they're lost over time.
Yep.
That's also what I appreciate about ketamine, as in it has a shorter neuroplasticity
Mhm.
um, period than other psychedelic.
Mhm.
So it really push you more, or give you more motivation, let's say, to work with
Yeah.
a therapist even more. So that is nice, that as has how ketamine is works
Mhm.
even more in symbiosis with therapy and coaching,
Yes.
or the other
Yes.
psychedelics. But the other
Yes.
psychedelics, as they have a longer neuroplasticity time after, so you can call it pink cloud. You are more
Mhm.
in the pink cloud
I love the
than
pink
the
cloud.
yes. And then you may have the, let's say, you may think you can do it on your own, and you
Yeah.
can be good in your own,
You
and
get that
then
false sense of security.
y-
Yeah.
yes, and then you
I'm
follow
good.
the
Okay.
pink cloud. Exactly, I'm good, I can figure out myself, I don't need to invest on myself more. I
Mhm.
The medicine will tell
Mhm.
me everything. And yes, you can have that relationship with the psychedelic, with the spirits, for sure. But the
Yeah.
support of someone who has different tools and supports you to, as you said, like practice and
Mhm.
makes those wires stronger, and
Yes.
also be that safe place where you can do your work, that safe place of making you forget about finding interpretation and use your thinking mind, but let's go into something deeper. It's
Yes.
definitely valuable. Hmm.
Or just that curiosity of what else is there, right? Like, because I think we all have that kind of, especially in Western cultures, we have the idea of like wanting to process or interpret something right away. I think it's okay
Yes.
to recognize that as our thinking mind and saying, I
Hmm.
see you thinking mind, right? Like honor it because it's very useful and valuable. But it's the ability to find that curiosity. And I think what you said earlier is really pertinent to kind of repeat. And that's that we oftentimes we find that when we're exploring these concepts, right, we want to just do the thing. We want to just go straight to the place. We want to just interpret. We want to get the meaning. We want to digest it. We want to get the answer, right? And
Hmm.
truly, like, although it can be satiating, right? It feels good to get the answer. It isn't the work, right? The work is to be able to open up to the curiosity of like, well, what else is there, right? Like that's one answer, right? And I think that's the point because that's how we learn to live in harmony with others. That's how we learn to live in harmony with ourselves is when we have this inherent ability to be curious again and say, well,
Hmm.
I wonder what that means for me. I wonder why that feels that way. I wonder why they're doing that way. I wonder why I feel like this. I wonder why my body needs so much rest right now. These are the questions that eventually lead to the type of communication we need, not the answer, but the type of communication we need to kind of cultivate within self.
Hmm.
So I think this was a pretty fun, wild ride, but I think let's summarize a little bit. So we talked a
Hmm.
little bit about like, why would someone want to seek therapy or coaching in the first place? And that's because we said we're here on earth and we're human, right? Like basically that everybody needs
Yes.
safe, supportive guidance, right? To learn their own internal process, to navigate conflict, to navigate difficulty, to navigate strife, challenge, grief, heartbreak, loneliness, fear, all of these types of,
Hmm.
and to try to perhaps learn to bring our entire beings into a greater state of harmony.
Yes.
And I think we talked a little bit about why that plays so well with ketamine treatment. We're
Hmm.
in a more neuroelastic state. We have more amenable neural firing to making more adaptation, to being more curious, to moving through blockages, to accelerating some of the work we're doing, right? In that therapeutic or coaching environment. And I think, overall, we talked about some of the benefits that we see when we're already in a therapeutic or coaching relationship and we start doing these types of treatments. We have increased emotional resilience. We have increased resilience overall. So when we get out of that fight or flight state, right, that like life or death state of living, which many of us are living in just because of the way our routines are, just
Mm-hmm.
because not we have some big trauma in our past. Some of us, yes, but also because of the way we live, we can get out of that fight or flight and we can start to live in like more harmony with ourselves, with our life. We can cultivate more changes that are in the direction we want to go. And I think therapy and coaching are really the some of the best resources we have to create
Mm-hmm.
safe, supportive environments to
Mm-hmm.
do this in. And that's not to say that those other relationships aren't important. Time in nature, time with self, self-care, friendships, family, coworkers, all the other places we communicate are valuable. It's simply to say that this one can be valuable in a different way for us when especially we're
Mm-hmm.
learning new language, this new system, this new process we're trying to kind of cultivate.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that this is forever. I think that's an important point to kind of end with is like, that doesn't mean that this chapter of life goes on forever. Some of us need this therapeutic and kind of targeted, focused work for a time. It has its time. We move through the thing, and maybe we move into a new chapter where it's about something totally different.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't meant to be, yes, the journey of self is meant to be lifelong, but all the chapters don't look the same of this book, right? So sometimes there's more intensive healing chapters, and sometimes there's lighter healing chapters or adventure chapters. So the goal is to kind of get this book to read the way you'd like it to and have the ending you'd want most. So this isn't something that I think a lot of people get put off by the idea that like, oh, I'm going to start this and it's going to be forever and I'm going to be in therapy for 100 years and I'm going to be in this treatment. You're not. It's a chapter in life, right? It's a time
Mm-hmm.
period. Um, but otherwise, I think this is a really valuable discussion about like why we see that therapy, coaching, relationships work so well and synergistically with ketamine.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've dispelled some of the misnomers out there about why, especially with integration work and what this provides for us, because it isn't always the thinking mind that needs to figure it out. Sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it just needs to
Mm-hmm.
be, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that was a great summary. Thank you. Like, that was perfect.
Thank you. Oh, thank
Nothing
you.
else to add. That was, you said
Thank
it
you.
all. Yes. But yes, like, really coaching and therapy with, combined with, psychedelic are
Yeah.
just like this perfect symbiosis
Yes.
that can support you,
Mm.
but I mean, you listener, or also
Yeah.
us. We
Yeah.
started our journey as well this way to
Yeah.
really
Very much.
grow and be in touch with who we really are, be in touch with what is again
Yeah.
the seed that inside us that is growing into
Yeah.
whatever plants we are,
Yep.
a flower,
Exactly.
a rose, a tree.
Yeah.
We're not all the same. And that's the beauty. It's like
Exactly.
shine your light, shine your own
Exactly.
light.
Yeah, we need you. We need your own individual light. The world needs you. The consciousness shift that's occurring needs you. Like we're all here for some unknown purpose. So like
Hmm.
sharing our light really is the best way to kind of, I think, the best path through that. So yeah.
Exactly. All right. So thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you,
And
Mel. Always love hearing, especially like the psychosynthesis and the linguistic background. Love that background
I,
today. So
oh,
very
thank you.
grateful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
thank you everyone for listening. If you have any questions, comments, please reach out. And namaste.